Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Susan Silver. I serve as SACE's liaison to the Department of Public Instruction and also lead our diagnostic services team here in the agency. Before we turn it over to Dr. Locklear, Chairwoman Locklear, we're going to do a quick roll call to ensure we have a quorum. So if you'll just say here, we do have some folks joining us online. And I'm having trouble seeing today. Jeremiah Moore. Cameo Lanning.
Here.
Amanda Frizard. Calvin Locklear.
Here.
Tina Lance.
Here.
Rodney Jackson.
Here.
Stacy Lynch.
Here.
Angelique Jacobs.
Here.
Brandy Jacobs.
Here.
Dorothy Stewart Yates. Representative Edward Godwin. Representative Charles Graham. Dr. LaRonda Lowry. And Dr. Tiffany Locklear. Madam Chair, you have a quorum. Just as a reminder to everyone, we are live on YouTube. Also, when you speak, please use your microphone and state your name before you make a statement or pass a motion. And I'm sorry, I missed Ms. Rhea Jacobs.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Madam Chair, you have a quorum. I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Happy Friday. The September SACE meeting is called to order. It's exciting to welcome each of you as we appreciate your willingness to serve American Indian students in the great state of North Carolina. Our first thing, we do have an agenda before us. May we have a motion to adopt the agenda as printed?
Rodney Jackson, I make a motion we adopt the agenda.
This is Cameo Lanning. I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. We also had your minutes that were linked in the Google Doc. I hope you've had time to review those minutes. Do we have a motion to approve our minutes from our May meeting?
Amanda Frizard, I motion to approve the minutes.
Rodney Jackson, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Before we go into our agenda today, I do want to share just a couple of announcements with you guys. The first one is that we do have someone that has been seated to the textbook commission, so that's very exciting. Ms. Shannon Brable, we're really excited about this appointment and having a seat at the table and a voice for our American Indian students. Our next announcement is on behalf of SACE. We would like to extend our sincerest congratulations to Mr. Rodney Jackson. He has been selected as the recipient of the 2002 NIEA Convention Community Service Award of the Year. And I'll just read from NIEA. They said your dedication not only to our students but to our Native communities was praised by your peers and colleagues. You are a testament to the strength of our leaders and an excellent example of what can be accomplished when a Native advocate and community organizer has both humility and passion for your work. So we are proud that you're being honored at the 53rd Annual NIEA Convention and Trade Show in Oklahoma. Congratulations indeed from SACE.
Thank you.
All right, next, we will move forward with the swearing in of our new members. If I could ask our three new members to come to the front, Mr. Calvin Locklear, Miss Stacy Lynch, and Miss Angelique Jacobs. So what we'll do, since there's three of you, is I'll just read the oath, and then after reading the oath, the three of you can say, I do. So I, with you, do solemnly swear that I will support and maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States, and that I will instruction on ways to improve coordination and communication for the benefit of American Indian students affected by the state and federal programs administered at the state level. Prepare and present an annual report to the North Carolina State Board of Education, tribal organizations, and to conference at the annual North Carolina Indian Unity Conference, and advise the North Carolina State Board of Education on any aspect of American Indian education when requested by the state board, educators, parents, students, business leaders, and other constituents. So if you just say I do and say your name.
I do, Stacy.
I do, Calvin Locklear.
I do, Audrey.
Welcome to Stacy. Congratulations. If you have not signed in, there is a sign-up sheet up front. You can do that on your own. We would also like to congratulate Mr. Rodney Jackson on he has been reappointed to Stacy. So we're just congratulating Mr. Jackson today. So congratulations on your reappointment indeed. Next on our agenda, Dr. Oxenine has not arrived yet, so Dr. Susan Silver is happy to go ahead with her sharing her 2001, 2022, 2021, 2022 data.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone, and welcome again to our new members. We are excited to work with you. I'll just explain a little bit more about my role. For those of you who are new, I do serve as a liaison between the agency and this council. I myself am a member of the Hallawasaponi tribe. I've worked with DPI since 2007. This is kind of my other duty as appointed, but certainly my passion point, as I'm a product of Indian education myself, but my primary job is doing diagnostic services. We've added to our team a face that many of you are familiar with as well, Ms. Consuela Richardson. She joined my team in 2021. Yes. So I said to her, so this is not her primary job either, but I said, I have a perfect project for you to join us on. So Dr. Briggs is a person you hear from a lot. She is still in the mix and will still be my right hand, but I now also have a left hand. I have a right hand and a left hand. So it is amazing. I'm very excited about that. So we want to welcome Consuela, who is running our tech today. And so I'm actually going to back out and I'm going to do the commission updates first. So we'll save the data for later so that we can all have time to process that, but also Mr. Gregg from the Commission of Indian Affairs is unable to make it today, but he did send some updates. So I'm going to move that ahead if that's okay, Madam Chair.
Absolutely.
And then we'll proceed from there. So he did send some updates. So I'll just be reading these on behalf of the Commission of Indian Affairs, and Mr. Richardson certainly sends his regards. So in terms of the textbook commission, which Dr. Locklear already spoke to, Governor Cooper has appointed Ms. Shannon Brayboy to the textbook commission effective July 1st. Mrs. Brayboy is an enrolled member of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina and the first American Indian to serve on the textbook commission. And I want to pause here for a moment to give credence to this council. I think sometimes people don't realize this isn't just a think tank, that this is an actionable council, and this is a direct result of your advocacy around having a role on that commission. And just again, for those who are new, just to give the history, this started from a discussion of the social studies standards and concerns about accuracy there, and our having a voice at the table, and needed a direct way to do that. And while the textbook commission will cover all the textbooks that come out, we certainly wanted someone there ahead of time for the social studies textbooks that are being released. Second item, Governor Cooper's American Indian Future Leader Page Week program. There is a link to that further down in your agenda. The American Indian Future Leaders Page Week will be held November 14th through 17th. It says we have transmitted that information to the state tribes, Indian organizations, commission members, etc. Go to the link which is there, and you can contact Aaron footer at that email address as well. And I will also give a shout out for this because I have personal links to everything. I served as a page when I was a teenager. Again, I am a product of Indian education here in North Carolina and the great programs we used to have, and it was a great experience. So certainly we want you to be advocates when you go back in your community to share that information and have students do those programs. It's an excellent program to be a part of. Next, the Indian Land Trust meeting. This meeting is scheduled on September 29th at 1:30. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss and follow up on the Lumbee Tribe's request to place 2 parcels of land into a trust. It's authorized under General Statute 1530A 406B. The invited attendees are the Commission's Land Trust Commission Chairperson, which is Veranda Oxendine, David Elliott, Mark Edwards, Gary Teague, Danya Strong, Steve Maynor, and Greg Richardson. There is a community development position vacancy. This position, my computer just fast forwarded on me. This position is being requested to increase the reposted to increase the applicant pool. This is the Workforce Innovations Opportunities Act program position previously held by Candace Lowry and is currently filled temporarily by Ms. Sue Faircloth. And there, well, we'll share a link later that you can go to if you would like information about that position. So again, certainly go back to your communities and make your communities aware that that position is available, because when we get positions, they are rare to come by. We certainly want to take advantage of those opportunities. The next announcement is the 25th Annual National Trail of Tears Conference and Symposium. They have tentative plans to attend the conference, the commission board, I assume. The conference will be held September 19th through 21st in Cherokee, North Carolina. Cherokee tribal leaders, speakers, elders, chiefs, and tribal members will join other leaders to honor, and I'm going to mess up the name. Do you know the names? It's Mound.
Is it Kadua or is it Nikwasi?
Nikwasi Mound. Thank you so much for the assist, Cameo. And the history of the Trail of Tears. The invited speakers include Principal Chief Richard Sneed, Secretary of the Interior Deb Holland, what we call Auntie Deb, National Park Service Superintendent Aaron Marr, and Secretary Reed with the North Carolina Department of Cultural Resources. The conference will be held at Harris Cherokee Casino in Cherokee, so certainly want to go back and advocate attendance at that as well. The 2023 North Carolina Indian Unity Conference workshop proposals. They have worked with leadership of the United Tribes to finalize the workshop proposal template and agreed to distribute it widely throughout their network. The deadline for submitting workshop proposals is December 15th, and that is something that SACE typically presents at. They typically submit a proposal, and at that time they share the annual report from the previous year. So you'll be hearing more about that. Another announcement, the North Carolina Native American Youth Conference, NCNAO. The conference was held at East Carolina University back in June. The commission sponsored a workshop during the conference and presented an overview of the commission, programs, services, and initiatives during one of the General Assemblies. The commission sponsored 23 students to the conference and paid $200 registration fees for those students. They hope to support students during the 2023 conference as well. Ms. Pamela Brewington, who is on staff, will serve as the Commission's honorary advisor to NCNAO, a seat that is called for in the NCNAO bylaws and the Commission's bylaws. I certainly want to support our youth. I'm also a product of NCNAO. Just saying, all those. I was in all that. Commission's Indian Tribes Times newsletter. The newsletter was published in July and coordinated by summer intern Paige Freeman, who is a student at UNC Charlotte. Ms. Page took the lead in developing the newsletter, and the commission was impressed with her work. There's a link to that newsletter as well that we will put in the chat later on. And the last announcement, the 79th National Congress of American Indian Annual Convention and Marketplace. The conference will be held October 30th through November 4th in Sacramento, California, and the commission has urged each tribe to send a representative to the conference. These are the end of the announcements on behalf of the Commission of Indian Affairs. Again, Mr. Richardson sends his regards. He is typically here with us, him or Ms. Crow, who's our representative, but they were unable to attend today. I won't ask for any questions because I don't know these updates I received, but they are certainly great partners in the work with the State Advisory Council on Indian Education. Madam Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you.
So we are moving ahead with our agenda, but I do see that Dr. Connie Locklear is with us. So, Dr. Connie. Dr. Connie is going to be presenting or representing the National Indian Education Association. We are so grateful to have someone from North Carolina serving in this capacity to represent American Indian students. Welcome, Dr. Locklear. It is great to have you back in the SACE room.
Thank you so much. For some reason, I got butterflies when I walked in here. I don't know why. But I'm excited to be here. Let me begin by saying, Tanake Nachadeha, Niyat Kani Lakler, Yiha Wat Iswa, Lumbee. I said, hello, happy to see you. I am Connie Locklear, people of the Dark Water of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. Before I move on with this presentation, I want to recognize a dear colleague and a former NIEA president, Mr. Curry Bird. I want to recognize Mr. Bird because this journey that I've been on for the past 3 years began with him. I have been attending NIEA since my children were small when I was a parent committee member. So my daughter is 35, so that tells you how old and how old I am and how long I've been attending NIEA. And all of those years in attendance gave me a lot of knowledge. But a couple years ago, I received a call from Mr. Bird that said, you ever thought about running for the board? And I thought, well, I don't know. And then after having some conversation, I took that leap of faith. And it has been a pleasure, a great honor for me to serve because no matter where I am, I represent my people. And the greatest joy I've had in my 28 years in education is working directly with my people. So I really appreciate that. I serve here as SACE chair and a member of this committee, and I just love the work that you do. I honor you for dedicating your time. This is important work. And as I talk about NIEA, I want you to think about membership. I want you to think about having a seat at the table. Several years ago, someone said to me, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. But you may not get what you want, so you need a seat at the table. So my reason for serving on NIEA is to push forth the importance of North Carolina, the Southeast region, which is the region that I represent, but also to make sure that we don't forget the voice of the state-recognized tribes. So excited about that. And I will say I'm a proud member of the Lumbee tribe. A lot of times we talk about embedding culture into education. That is so wrong. We embed education in the culture. Culture is who we are. We don't take culture off when we walk in the classroom. We don't put it back on when we walk out. But we embed the education into the culture because culture is who we are. So once again, thank you for being here. So nice to see friendly faces. I'm excited. I want to reiterate what Dr. Locklear said in the beginning about Mr. Rodney Jackson. I said to him a few weeks ago, about a week or so ago, I got something to tell you, but I can't tell you now. And he texted me back and he said, why not? I said, I'll tell you when the time comes. And he said, you have me curious. And then later on he texted and he said, look what I got. And I said, oh, okay, now I can tell you. So I am so excited to see one of our own from North Carolina being recognized at the National Convention, which will be in October. And I encourage all of you to attend. It begins October the 5th. Love for all of you to be there if not. So we'll move forward with our presentation. When we started these presentations and they gave us these videos, you're going to see some individuals in these videos that look similar because I think it's important when we're presenting to our regions that we make those videos, that we make those videos our own and we make them symbolic to our communities. So who is NIEA? It's the National Indian Education Association, and you see the mission and the vision. And you also see these strategic initiatives, and these things are so important. These are things I'm going to talk about as we go through this presentation. And if you want to stop me at any time, I'm a teacher. I'm used to being stopped. Well, I'm teaching more, but I'm always a teacher. But I don't have a problem with that, or we can wait till the end and have questions. So I'm not going to read all of this to you, but you have this, and I don't mind you sharing it if they like to have a copy of it. But you see our mission, and you see the vision. Here, our mission is to advance comprehensive culture-based educational opportunities for American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians. And you see the vision is to promote educational sovereignty and to support continuing use of our traditional language and our knowledge, and to improve educational opportunities and results in our community. And that's what this whole Title VI grant is about, to improve educational opportunities for our students. It is a supplemental grant, and you know that, and it goes above what the districts do. Move to the next slide, please. I have the pleasure in this capacity to serve as the first vice president, and I represent the Southeast region. Next slide. On the next slide, you will see the members of the board. And our president is Mr. Jason Dropick, and you see the other members of the board. We've had members in the past from the Lumbee tribe. Dr. Dees was one of our recent members. Next slide. This is the history of NIEA. It came about during the Civil Rights era, and there was in 1969 when this legislation was passed. Out of that report, the Indian Education, a National Tragedy, a National Challenge, came the birth of NIEA. So this is the 53rd year of NIEA. We celebrated 50 years in 2019. And it was from this recommendation that the NIE board was birthed. And we're so excited about that. We have a long history of advocacy. Those of you that are Title VI directors, you know this is the 50th year of OIE funds. In 1972, the Indian Education Act was established, and the Office of Indian Education National Advisory Council for Indian Education was developed. So this year we're celebrating the 50th year of OIE funds. Robeson County has had OIE funds since 1974. And as you know, that OIE funds are renewed annually. So every year we have to reapply for that grant, but they have been around since 1972. In 1975, the Indian Self-Determination Act, Assistance Act was passed, and as you see here, the elementary, I'm not going to read all of this, Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and what we are in now is the piece that I really want to talk about, and that is ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. It's so important for tribes to understand their voice and to utilize that voice in their tribal communities. Because of ESSA, we are required to have tribal consultation in all of our, what we call these affected areas. And those are those areas that receive $40,000 or more, or their population is at least 50% Indian, American Indian. In Robeson County, we meet both of those criteria. So that Every Student Succeeds Act is very important. And I think a lot of times our tribal communities are not really aware of the power that they have based on this act. And it's so important for us to make sure that we understand that. Next slide, please. These are some current legislation and priorities that are in place. Of course, when COVID hit, everybody had to talk about how COVID was impacting education. And so we looked at COVID-19 relief and recovery. We had the Higher Education Act, the school climate, and school infrastructure. Right now, there is, with the higher education priority, there is an act that is coming through Senator Schott's office, who is the senator for Hawaii, and it is called the Native American Teacher and Pathways Act. And we're hoping that with working through NIEA, that pathway is going, or that act will pass, and there will be an opportunity for some of our teachers to have access to higher ed opportunities. We know here in North Carolina, and not only North Carolina, but across the nation, that a lot of our teachers, a lot of our indigenous individuals have trouble passing the test. That's true. But just because a person can't pass the test does not determine whether they're going to be a great teacher. How many of you know someone right now that did not pass the test, but is a great teacher? Sometimes they have the pedagogy, but they may not be able to pass that test. And a lot of times these tests, you have to remember, they were made not from an indigenous perspective, but from what? A middle-class Caucasian perspective, westernized world. So when we look at this higher education priority, we're looking at data sovereignty, support and fully funded TCUs, which are tribal colleges and universities, support, funding, and accountability to tribes and native serving institutes, and the opportunity to create scholarships, loan payment programs, institutional grants, native language programs, grants to attract teachers to native majority schools. We have a lot in our communities, especially in our native communities. Most of our native communities are in rural communities, are they not? Our largest native communities reside in rural communities. And in those communities, when we're looking at this higher education priority and why it's so important, is we need teachers in our classrooms. And we need teachers in our classrooms that look like our students. And so it's so important if we can get some of these pieces in place as we look at Native Education Support and Training Act. When we look at that, we can get these people in place so that they will be in the classroom teaching our students and helping our students so that they can be successful. We're looking at trying to diversify the teaching workforce by increasing the minimum teaching rate from $4,000 to $8,000, and that is so important for us. Going to school climate, and the priority here, where you see the funding, the Push Out Act, and the congressional oversight to reduce exclusionary discipline in schools and strengthen the civil rights data collection. The reason this is so important to me, when you look at many of our students in some of our schools, if you look at the data, our students of color, including our native students, sometimes are placed in exceptional children's programs. And it has very little to do with their intellect. A lot of times it has to do with the lack of relationship. It also has to deal with the lack of culture and people really not understanding who they are. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. You're looking at her. In third grade, I had a teacher that placed me in special ed. I never should have been in special ed. But it was just because she didn't understand. My parents moved from Robertson County. When you're in Robertson County, it's like everywhere you look, there's somebody that looks like you. Then when you move to another community and there's very few people that look like you, and the teacher says to you, all black boys raise your hands, all black girls, all white boys, all white girls, and you don't raise your hand, and then she just assumes that you're being defied, then what happens to that little student? I'm going to say that little girl is me, you shut down. So the teacher just assumed that I should have been placed in special ed, and that was not the case. Congressional leaders have begun to address the gaps in trauma-informed education through hearings, and congressional leaders continue to examine troubling reports of disproportionate disciplinary action as it relates to some of our students. We're looking at the next slide, please. When we look at school infrastructure, we're looking at Title VI funds. There's $198,000 million right now, but this is older, so there's more funding in place there. You're looking at native language immersion programs. We're looking at schools construction and impact aid. Many of our tribal communities, our students are in schools that are extremely old. Is that true? Yes. I tell you right now, Robertson County is getting ready to build the technology school. There's been a lot of controversy surrounding that, but it is in place, and we're so excited to say that. But the last school that was built was in 1984. I graduated in 1984. Our schools are very old, and this is just not in Robertson County. This is all across the nation. We need more funding for school construction. One thing when I met with legislators at Hill Week, one thing that I discussed with them is that when the pandemic hit, what did the government give us? They gave us hotspots, Chromebooks. But what good is a hotspot or a Chromebook when you don't have infrastructure to support it? So when you're living in rural communities, such as where the Kahari, the Lumbee, the Halawasaponians, all of our tribes, the majority of them are in rural communities. When you're living in rural communities and you give someone a new Chromebook, what good is that Chromebook when you don't have the internet? It's like giving me a brand new jacuzzi tub in the desert with no water to put in it. So those are some of the conversations that we've had with legislators. So we need to look at infrastructure, and that is happening. I will tell you that just this week, Spectrum is now in my community. And that is exciting. And that's just not my community, but that's so many other communities. So these are some things that we've been working on. When you look at the programs, the National Educator Initiative, Cultural and Language-Based Teaching Resources, Tribal Communities and Schools, Healing in Tribal Communities and Schools, then Healing Intergenerational Trauma, highlighting Native veterans, supportive student success in the Navajo Nation. These are some funds that they have. I want to talk to you, though, a little bit. I want to move away from this program. But this year, NIEA was granted a $7 million grant, if I'm not mistaken, from Mackenzie Scott. All of you probably know who Mackenzie Scott is. Mackenzie Scott is, her husband's name? He is the owner of Amazon. It's her former husband. And so she has been giving her money away, her funds away to various communities. She also donated, I think it was $1.3 million to the Lumbee Tribe Boys and Girls Club. But she donated this money to NIEA. So there's going to be, because of that funding, there's additional opportunities now that we can put forth. The National Educator Initiative program. NIEA Teacher Initiative was launched in 2017 at Hill Week in response to a 2016 resolution from our membership. That's the next slide. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. There you go. Okay. And you can see from this the different things that we're looking at. We're looking at teacher recruitment, cultural-based teaching, which is the second pillar, advocacy, and teacher retention. One thing I will say about NIEA, and that is their strength in advocacy. They're in Washington. They're on the front lines. They are working diligently to push forth the needs of American Indian communities. And that is the one thing that their strength is. Right now, we're looking more towards Native education, and we're working on one of our committees to develop a repository, because when a lot of our Native individuals are looking for indigenous knowledge, it's very difficult sometimes to find research that focuses strictly on indigenous communities. And so right now, NIEA is putting forth developing a repository, a place where Natives or indigenous individuals can go and find that information and use it to support their research. Next slide, please.
You have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
And you may cover this at some point, I just wanted to put it out there. Are any of your initiatives directed towards increasing teacher pay?
A lot of that is talking towards teacher pay, but that is more of a state mandate.
I get that. I think that that's also a factor as to why more kids aren't going into teaching. But anyway, thank you.
You are exactly right, but then that goes from state to state. And I think you on this board have a voice to push that as well. Talking to your legislators, I still speak to legislators about teacher pay. I spoke to one recently. And not only teacher pay, but educator pay in general, and why we need to support educators. Who are the people in the beginning? Why am I standing here? I'll tell you why I'm standing here. I'm standing here because of my 4th grade teacher. My 3rd grade teacher was the one that put me in exceptional children's program. She didn't think I had the capacity to learn. My 4th grade teacher recognized something totally different, and I'm standing here because of her. Even when I was working on my dissertation, I wanted to throw in the towel, and I could still hear her voice as that 4th grade child telling me, Connie, you got this, you can do it. So teachers are the ones that encourage our children from the very beginning, but they are trying to develop pathways to help indigenous individuals get into the teacher education pipeline, looking at different ways that we can get in. And the thing is, not just a test. One test should not determine whether you're going to be eligible to be a teacher or not. And that's the issue we have. But as far as pay, and I think Dr. Silver can witness to this, that is a state-to-state issue. And unfortunately, when I first started teaching in 1994, I was so excited. I think it was 95, 96. We got this huge jump in salary. And I was like, wow. And then we kept getting jumps. And then it was like all of a sudden it started going down. And it's been going down for the past year. And right now what really hurts teachers is that when you are a veteran teacher at the end of your career, there's very little leeway to move forward on the salary pay scale. And that's what's very sad. The next one is our cultural language-based resources. And as I said to you earlier, this is the repository that I'm talking about. I have been serving on this repository. It is the NRA committee, which is the Native Research and Evaluation Committee. And in that committee, we're working to put things in place so that our teachers, our students, everyone has access to this. And this was kind of implemented, and I shared this with them at NIEA years ago when I was on SACE, and even before I came on, when we started developing that culturally responsive module. I couldn't get my word out right. The culturally responsive module, to ensure that our teachers in our classroom who were not Native, who were not Indigenous, had some idea of the American Indian population in this area. So when they spoke to their children, they would be accurate in the things that they said. Because as you know, we've had teachers to say, oh, you don't exist anymore. You're not here anymore, and those things. So we wanted to squash that. So this is an opportunity here to have an additional resource base that is a national repository that everybody can use as far as it relates to resources. Right now, if you go to NIEA's page, you'll see some of their teacher resources that they already have on their page that you can utilize for your classrooms. And unfortunately, we have individuals that wait to November to start talking about Indian Heritage Month. And that is great, it's Indian Heritage Month. But we're here from January to December. We shouldn't just talk about it in November. So that's Connie there. Healing historical trauma. And these are some pieces that we're focused on. As you know, right now, boarding schools and the impact that it has had on Native communities, that is huge right now. And we're looking at putting things, and we're addressing this historical trauma and how it has impact. What we don't realize sometimes is even though our children were not exposed to this, the things that we were exposed to or our parents were exposed to, those things were passed on to us. We take those same attributes and we pass them on to our children. And then if we don't stop that, what do? They pass them on to their children. So it's very important for us to look at historical trauma and how it is impacting all of us. I will tell you one thing that I was told when I first took over the job as Indian Ed that was so powerful to me. I had this great opportunity from the University of Michigan, and they were seeking students to attend a summer workshop, and it was all free, and I sent the information home. And this one child whose parents I knew would not sign the paperwork. And I said, tell him it's for me. And he said, he knows, but he won't sign it. So I talked to the parent and asked, why was he not signing it? He said, I don't believe anything. I don't have any trust. He said, when my grandfather died, he had paid for this land all his life. And so my dad got that land. They come and took that land for us and said it was never paid. And we had paid for that land all our life. That level of historical trauma lends itself to the lack of trust with people because of the things that have happened. And we pass that on, so we're working on trying to heal our people so that we can create a positive and safe learning environment, not only for us as adults, but for our students in our classrooms. I would want to talk to you just a little bit before we move from there. They have this great exercise, and I asked to be trained in this exercise, and the reason I did is because it was so powerful. And I don't know if some of you have seen it, but it's called the blanket exercise. And I brought this to my entire staff and to individuals. We partner with the tribe, we partner with UNCP, and with my staff. And in this exercise, basically there are blankets all over the floor. And everybody stands on the blanket. The blanket represents land. And then we begin to tell the history. And you have people that serve as colonists. You have people that serve, there's a facilitator that's leading this instruction and talking about what happened. And then you'll notice somebody will go tap you on the shoulder and tell you to sit over here. Or they'll tell you to go in that area where they died. And at the end of this exercise, you see very few blankets left on the floor. What does that represent to us? That talks about how we were on all of this land. And because of the historical trauma, as you talked earlier about the Trail of Tears and all the things that have happened to all of our people, now our land is limited. And it talks, and in that piece, it brings in the boarding school piece and how our children were taken into boarding schools and how they were traumatized and how many of them died. And then one piece that was so powerful is that I'm giving away too much here and I don't mean to, but it's just so powerful that it's so eye-opening that even children that came home from boarding school, because there was so much traumatic experience that happened there, and their whole entire indigenous mindset, they were forced to change. That now back in their communities, they no longer fit in. And so there became a level, and even now, a level of lateral violence. And I know you've heard that term before. Lateral violence is when we fight against our own, when we come against each other. And that blanket exercise was so powerful for the instructors at UNCP, so powerful for my staff, for the tribal community, that everybody just gave accolades and warm reviews and really wants to come back again. And so I want to offer this again to my staff again, because I want them to understand the impact that this has had from generation to generation to generation to generation. And sometimes without realizing it, we pass that stuff down. We continue to pass it. And there's time for us to start healing. So that's what we talk about as it relates to healing historical trauma. This is a piece here, and we talk that they have the Warrior Spirit Project, and they won these 2 grants in 2020. One of them is the Warrior Spirit Project, illuminating the contributions of Native Americans. And this is a piece that's so important for, I think, all of us in our community. The importance of highlighting the impact that our ancestors have had on our nation and what they brought to our communities. So this Warrior Spirit Project brings together Native subject matter experts, curriculum writers, teachers, historians who are collecting oral history and primary sources of Native veterans to develop culturally relevant lessons and resources that will offer a means for students and educators to connect to the Native American Veterans Memorial, either in person or virtually. And we started virtually, of course, because of COVID. The second one is gathering the personal narratives of Native veterans from tribal communities. And this one is focused strictly in Montana because the funding came from there, using those narratives to develop curriculum for use in schools throughout the state of Montana in support of the state's Indian education for all. These are some events, and I put these on here, and this is where we had our Heal Week. And I had the pleasure to sit and talk to legislators, and this was the one we had that was virtual, and last year was face-to-face. And so Heal Week, if you get the opportunity to attend, it's your opportunity to meet with legislators and share with them your concerns in your communities. I share with them the concerns in my communities, the concern for the Southeast region, and if there's something you would like for me to share from the Southeast region, you could just shoot me an email. But you have the opportunity to be at Heal Week. So this is an awesome event, and we're very excited about having the opportunity to sit down, walk the halls, and sit down with legislators and say, these are the concerns that we have. Yes, we're small in numbers, but we still have a voice, and we're still here. And these are the things that we want to address as it relates to our American Indian students. Not only our American Indian students, but our veterans, our elders, our communities. We are lacking in these areas. These are the things that we need. Next one, please. This is the piece I want to get to. I have been a member since NIEA. I told you since my children were small, and I served on the parent committee. I started going to NIEA, and I got excited about being there, and I've been attending these conferences for years. The driving force behind this organization is membership. In the Southeast region, our membership is about 4.6% compared to the nation. I would really love for all of you to become members. The membership is around, I think it's $80 just for our basic membership. Then they have different levels of membership, but the lowest membership is $80. And that gives you access to their resources. It gives you access to the things that are happening at NIEA. It gives you access to serve on our committee work. And I would encourage you, if you are a member, to serve on committee work. Let your voice be heard. It's very important. So if you get an opportunity, become a member of NIEA. This is the bloodline of our organization. Through our annual membership dues, we support the capacity to provide resources for our programs, our services, as well as guide our policy work and elect our board of directors. NIEA members receive benefits, and NIEA works continuously to engage our members and ensure communication with those benefits as it relates to those benefits for this vital base of supports and timely and relevant. And it's so important. If you would like to be a member, please go to the next slide. This is really the reason I've asked to do some of these workshops. I want you to look at Southeast region. I said 4.6. I think it's gone up now. It's 4.3 there. But when we look at that, a lot of times people will say to me when I encourage membership and I push membership, and they will say, well, NIEA doesn't even think about us down here or state recognized tribes. And I'm like, no, we do. We had the meeting several years ago, and Diana was here, the director of OIE, the executive director of OIE. She was here to speak. Rodney Jackson has just received this award, our former president, and I get the opportunity to serve as first vice president. But when you look at that piece there, 4.3%, which is now 4.6%, you know, people talk about, why do you have to pay to be this? I'll tell you. I'm just going to give you a generic reason that's not indigenous. It's just generic. How many of us go to Sam's? Anybody go to Sam's? Yeah. What do you have to pay to go into Sam's? You have to pay a membership, right? I've been a member of NCAE before I ever walked in the classroom. And that's been 28 years ago. And I've kept my membership. If you want a seat at the table, you want a voice, become a member. I would like to encourage everyone to become a member. I want to see this number for the Southeast rise. I want this number to move to maybe 10%, 30%. You look at the West and the Great Plains. There's a large population there of American Indians that become members of NIEA. We would love for you to attend the conference. If you're not able to attend the conference, become a member and be part of the organization. That is the piece I really want to drive home today because it's so important. If you look here to next slide, and this just gives some information about membership and what's available. And I won't read all that to you. You can look at that later. But why become a member? We need our voices to be heard. We cannot have a voice without representation. I'm going to tell you the reason I do this work, and I should have updated this picture because that picture has changed, the one at the bottom. That's my granddaughter. And a lot of times this work in Indian education is hard work, but it's heart, H-E-A-R-T, is hard work. I shared with you earlier when my family moved from a community where I was known as a Native American girl, an Indian girl, a little Indian girl, and I was proud of that, to a community where I was not noticed. I don't ever want my children, my grandchildren, your children, to sit in a classroom and have those feelings. We have a lot of children across this state that sit in classrooms and they deny that they're American Indian. Not as much in your larger American Indian populations, but this happens more in our urban communities. Sometimes they don't want that voice, but they need to be proud of who they are. This organization focuses on our people and the education of our children and how we can support and bring about change for our children. And I would encourage you to be part of that. That little girl at the bottom, and my grandson who is 3, the other one who's getting ready to turn 3, and my unborn who will be here in November. Those are my driving force with this work. Someday this work makes me want to just pack my stuff and head home. And I'm going to say this, and this is not NIEA speaking, so if you say that this came from NIEA, it's not. It's coming from Connie. So I'm going to back off from the script right now. And this is my core belief. This is me. There's a verse in the Bible that says, when Paul was speaking, and he says, "For me to live is Christ, but to die is gain." And what he meant is for him to continue this work is for Christ, but for him to die, he would have so much more. Some days I feel like that. For me to continue this work is for my people. For me to walk away would be my gain. Because sometimes it can get rough. Some days it can be difficult. But the proudest day of my 28-year career was when I walked in and I became the director of NIEA. And I sat at my desk. And all of a sudden it hit me that I was doing this work for my people. I never had a day I hated the classroom. I never had a day that I didn't want to teach. I love teaching. It was my joy. But when I sat at that desk as the Indian Ed director and I knew that I had the opportunity to impact my children, and they're my children, they're my people, it changed my whole perspective on what I do. And that's what NIEA does. It impacts the work of our children. So how can you help? Next slide. You can donate. You can become a member. You can advocate. These are the things that help us. We are stronger in numbers. A lot of times people will say, we need this, we need that, we need that. But we need you on the front lines too. We need you to be and that's what you are right now. You may not believe it, but you are on the front lines because you are sitting in this capacity as a voice for every American Indian child in North Carolina. You are advocating. I want you to think about advocating from the national level. Be a voice for our students from that level. And there's a link there that if you want to join, we can share this with you. You can share this later. There it is. You go to the next slide, please. Serving as a board member. And I say this because I have one more year. This is my third year, and they're 4-year terms. I have one more year. And I'm hoping somebody is going to jump up and say, I want to serve. So in order to be a board member, you must be a member of NIEA. You also must serve on one of NIEA's committees. So if you go ahead and join now and have that year of service, when it comes time for this Southeast region position to be available, then you can say, I've served on these committees. And these are the committees that we have. We have governance, advocacy, fiscal, and then native control of native education as first vice president. Those are the committees that I serve over. So you have native educator, education and development. That's the NEED committee, and that's the one I was talking to you about, the Education Pathways Act that's in the works now. This native education systems is focused about looking at how our educational systems are meeting the needs of our students. And the last one is NRA, and that's where I talk, which is Native Research Assessment and Evaluation Committee. That's the committee where I talk to you about the repository and the work that's being done there. So I would love for you to start thinking about this. As I said, I have one more year. I want somebody from the Southeast region to jump on this and be a part and serve. Be a voice. Thank you for your time. I'll entertain any questions at this time.
Thank you. I'm happy to report I'm attending NIEA this year and presenting at NIEA, so I'm excited about that. We feel the need to do that after that presentation, right? We all need to go.
Great! That's the goal, right?
I do have a couple questions. I hope that you guys do too. When you talked about NIEA, you put an emphasis on you spoke about tribal consultation and meaningful collaboration, and our educational summit was on that, the last one that we implemented. And a lot of times on social media, we see the tribal consultation part, right? We see that one meeting, that tribal consultation part. And so what I'm always concerned about is that meaningful collaboration. And one of the things that I would love to see is our Title VI coordinators being on the admin leadership team, having a seat at the table at every district. Do you know if our Title VI coordinators, if any of them are have a voice at the district level?
I cannot speak for every administrator or coordinator or director. I know that I have been on several of our admin meetings. I can't say I'm in all of them, but I am in a lot of them. I do think that Title VI directors need to be at that table because when you're talking about this grant, again, is a supplemental grant. And what it does, it goes above what the district already does. So we can't, and the reason I keep saying that because if we don't, then we're supplanting. And that is completely against the guidelines and the regulations of this grant. So by having a seat at the table, at the admin table with the administrators and what's going on in that district, it makes you aware. And I think sometimes what people forget, administrators at all levels, is that this is, sometimes people say that's the Indian grant. That is not correct. This is an educational grant that focuses on American Indians, and that is the piece that's so powerful. It is an educational grant. The other piece, going back to tribal consultation, if there are districts where that's not happening, when they have that tribal consultation, that's an opportunity for that tribe to say, we want to ensure that that Title VI director is sitting at that admin table so they can bring this information back to us. My parent committee consists of someone from the board. It also consists of someone from our tribe. We have a tribal member, or not tribal council member, but someone that works with the tribe that attends our board meetings as well. And so they're able to hear what's going on in our program and take that back. And that's the other piece that's so powerful. When we talk about tribal consultation, sometimes the piece that's missing in tribal consultation is ongoing. That is the piece that's missing. Sometimes we say, oh, we're having a tribal consultation meeting today. Here's the information. Sign the form, and that's the end of it. It should be constant. It should be ongoing. It should be timely. It should be meaningful. And what that means is that if it's meaningful, it doesn't imply that the districts are going to say, this is how we're going to do it, and you have no input. And it also doesn't imply that the tribe's going to say, this is how you're going to do it, and they have no input. It's an opportunity for these two entities to come together, to have a collaborative meeting, and to make sure that everybody understands the needs of the American Indian students that reside in that community. I don't know if I've answered your question.
I do want to make sure that, that we can advocate and be a voice that our Title VI coordinators are being included in that meaningful collaboration so that it is ongoing and it is timely in our districts. Rather than there's these leadership meetings, right, and then after the leadership meetings, they come to our Title VI coordinators and say, well, what do you think about this? And then we have this profound safety report that we spend so much time working on, and we put so much intentionality in that. And I think it's important that our Title VI directors have the voice to be able to share this safety report in our districts, align instructional data. We continue to say each and every year that our American Indian students are lagging behind others. But what are our districts doing about it? And I think it really circles back to that meaningful collaboration.
And I will say that a few years ago, one of the recommendations from SACE was that that districts would utilize the SACE report as they develop their SIP plans. And I know in our district, I shared that with our my assistant superintendent, who is my superior officer, and that they would also place it on the district's webpage. And I know every time I get it, I send it out and say, here it is, and we put it on the webpage. And it's also supposed to be used to drive the instruction, to utilize this report to see where the gaps are, what areas need to be addressed, and how we can address them based on the data. And that is the piece. So it's to inform our instruction and to utilize that. As I said earlier, I can only speak for me. I know I can also speak for Cumberland County because I know Rodney's part of a lot of his leadership meetings, and I'm part of some of our leadership meetings as well. But I do think it is important for every Title VI individual who is in one, especially those affected areas. And those areas are outlined in the SACE report, if I'm not mistaken. And those areas are the areas that receive $40,000 or more, or have at least or 50% of their population. So it's one or the other, or both. And if they have a seat at the table, because what we forget sometimes is these are federal funds. These funds come from the Office of Indian Education, which falls under the umbrella of the U.S. Department of Ed. That is why we have to have tribal consultation. That is why not only do we have to have it in our districts, but also the DPI, Department of Public Instruction, is supposed to be ensuring that these tribal consultation meetings are going on, because there's information that they have to submit as well as it relates to federal funds. If I'm not, isn't it? Okay. So, additional questions?
Connie, go ahead, Amanda. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Connie, you have to be on a committee before you can be on the board.
You do. You have to serve on a committee. And what I was saying earlier is that this year our committee work, these are all the committees up there. So look at the committees, and she can send you all that PowerPoint. And if you see those committees, think of one that you might be interested in. And then what you can do, and when you become a member and you just share some information, if you just want to reach out to me and say, I would like to serve on this committee, I can shoot your name to the person that's in charge of that committee, or chair of that committee, and make sure that you are on there. In order to serve on a committee, though, you have to be a member.
Now, going to the conference that we went to in June on the Hill, does that count as?
I think it does count, but I think they more look at you wanting to serve on one of those committees. And those committees meet usually once a month. Some meet every other month, and it's usually an hour. And so you could meet maybe 6 to 10 times a year, something like that. So I know it seems like a lot of extra time, but it's only an hour. So I can get you all that information and ensure. But going to Hill Week is awesome. It also looks at service, but they really want you to serve on a committee. And I can shoot that information. If you give me your names, and you can get my email. Okay, all of you can have my email. And if you're interested in becoming a member, you can go to that link, get your membership. And if you're interested in serving on one of those committees, shoot me your information and I'll get it out to the appropriate person.
I ask these questions because Connie and I are going to be retiring in about 3 years, so we need people to replace us.
I'm on a downward slope. I used to worry about, let me tell you how much I'm on the downward slope. This is my former student. So you tell me, he's young and I'm getting older. So I'm on the downward slope. But as I said, I will always be an educator at heart. I love teaching. STEM is my background, mathematics. Never hated a day going in the classroom. But Indian education is my passion. And I appreciate your time. You had a question, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Well, thank you for all of your information. It was very informative. As Dr. Locklear mentioned, living in Orange County, I am trying to get an Indian education program at that district. They do not even know what it is. They do not know that it's outside funding that comes from the federal government, like you mentioned. So you, as Southeast Director, how can you help us on the board to advocate to the superintendent how beneficial that is for our district in Orange County and also Durham County, which are big parts of North Carolina? And it doesn't, I am Lumbee like yourself, but it doesn't just impact Lumbees, it impacts all Native students that live in the state.
Well, the first thing I would say is that as long as you have to have at least 10 students to apply for the grant. Yep. And I know you're aware that you've probably looked at that already. And the way I would address this is, first of all, the needs that our American Indian students have are very similar to the needs of all of our students in our subgroups. And this is supplemental funding. This is not going to take away from what the district's already doing. This is going to add to the district. So what it does is it gives you additional funding in order to meet the needs of your students. And what you could say is we could utilize this money for after-school tutoring that focuses on our American Indian students. You just come up with a plan. If you want to reach out to me, and I've shared this multiple times, if there's communities that would like for me to come in and they want to invite me in and speak, that I would be glad to do that. But I think sometimes people don't really understand the educational funding. They think that it is an Indian grant. It's an educational grant with a focus on American Indian students. The other thing that's very powerful is this, and this is the piece that sometimes districts don't understand. With this funding, and when this legislation was written in 1969, that the grant funds came out in 1972. The legislation was written very vague. And the reason it was is to ensure that no one in the American Indian community was left out. So with that Title VI, and what I mean by that is that Title VI grant, it states that if it goes all the way back to the grandparent. We have students in our programming. That's why when we look at the SACE report, we look at information that's in Power School. And honestly, it's not accurate because we have students that are listed in Power Schools that are African American, that are Caucasian, that are Hispanic, but they have a 506 form because that 506 form goes all the way back to the grandparent. So if you have a child in your community that's listed as Caucasian, but that mother says, well, my grandmother was American Indian, my grandmother was Halawa, my grandmother was Maharian. Oh, well, then your child qualifies for these funds. These are, and then lay out what these funds could do, how they can help. You can provide various opportunities for students as it relates to help with scholarships, as it relates to help with applying for college, as it relates to just opportunities for them to be involved in leadership capacities and preparing them for college. And not only that, but preparing them academically and ensuring. Right now, what's the buzzword in education? It's equity. The buzzword is equity right now. Everywhere you turn, it's equity this, equity that. We've been fighting for equity. I'm not going to say how long, but anyway. We've been fighting for equity for a long time. So all of a sudden now everybody wants to talk equity. So the thing is, what this grant does is it helps level the playing field. We're never going to get back what was taken from us. We're not. But this legislation came about as a way to say, listen, we took the land. All of these things were done to the American Indian population. This funding is set aside to ensure that their students will receive additional resources, additional opportunities beyond what the district already applies. So this is a way to just say this is another way to level the playing field. And it's equity, it's not equality. It's not giving everybody the same thing. It's giving one. I may need 2 steps. She may need 1. That's equity. So I think those are the ways that we can address it from that perspective and look at some things. If you would like for me to talk with you at a different time, just shoot me an email. We can talk, try to develop a plan, because we're not trying to change what the district's already doing. We're just trying to provide additional opportunities, and we're trying to give them equitable access to other opportunities, help them be successful.
I actually have an equity question. I'm sorry. So, I'm from Robeson County. I'll always advocate from that perspective. And I do know that Robeson County is awarded, I'm not sure what the grant is, but it's one of the highest, right? And so my understanding is the hiring process has changed as it relates to our Indian influence. Can you give us some insights on that and maybe speak to us on how equity is being ensured throughout that district since that hiring process has changed?
Well, we do, I don't want to say for certain, but we are the highest, or one of the highest. We are 33,000 shy of 2.5 million. That's what our grant funds are this year. We employ 34 individuals in our grant. When it comes to equity, I will tell you about, because we are such a large grantee, when you receive money, you're going to receive a I guess I would say, I don't want to say the word audits, but they're going to look at you a little bit more. So a couple of years ago when we were audited and they did come to see us, one of the things that came out of that is that equity as it relates to placement of individuals. Purnell Sweat is one of our largest American Indian populated schools. We have about 1,600 or so kids there, but around 1,400 or more are American Indian or have an ED 506 form. So with that being said, when they looked at where we had our individuals placed at that time, we had 3 full-time youth development specialists. Now, we call them youth development specialists. The grant defines us, and this is another thing you can take to your district. The grant defines us as student advocates, which means we advocate for that student to the nth degree. When the principal said, I'm had enough, I'm ready to get rid of them, we're still advocating. That's our job. We are to advocate to the nth degree. So they basically said equity didn't exist within that school based on the population. So we had to move a different individual there. He's there now 4 days at another school 1 day. So we have almost 4 full-time individuals there because of that. With the way the population is changing in the county because of some different dynamics that's taking place, we do need to look at equity and ensure that our individuals are there. There was some changing, as you suggested in your questioning, but there has been some changing, but I am part of the interview process again. In the past, the Indian Ed director was the person that hired, and now that has been changed a little bit. It's been tweaked, but I do have the opportunity to sit in the interview, so that has been able to bring back some of that equity that we need within the district.
So you're not leading these interviews?
No, ma'am, I'm not.
So you're not leading these interviews?
No, ma'am, I'm not.
Rather, you're almost sitting as a committee member?
I'm one of the interview committee members, yes.
So,
And prior to this year, Indian Ed interviewed that. And I will say this as it relates to that question. The grant specifically, if you go to the Federal Register, this is the thing that the grant says. It says Indian preference, American Indian preference. What that means is this. That means if you have 2 individuals that apply for that job, or say, well, you had multiple individuals, but you narrow it down to 2. That person is Caucasian and has a PhD. That person is American Indian and has a master's. The American Indian gets it because it's Indian preference. And if you go to the Federal Register, you'll see that in the guidelines, and you'll see that in legislation, and that's what it means. And the reason I say that is there are communities where you don't have that population to pull from. And that's, if you don't have that population to pull from, well, obviously you hire someone who is not native, because if you don't have the population. But in Robeson County, we have been blessed and able since, as long as I can remember, everybody that works for Indian education, including now, is American Indian.
So is there like a hiring recommendation process? Is there a process? Who makes the recommendation? Is it a committee recommendation? Is it a principal recommendation?
Prior to me being back on the committee, it was. Now, I interviewed yesterday, and the principal, along with myself, was able to make the recommendation.
So you and the principal made a recommendation, so it's the committee?
Along with the principal's recommendation. We as a group. Yep. Well, I give input, and ultimately the principal makes the recommendation, but I'm allowed to give that input and be part of that.
So all these principals have training on the OIEA grant, and they're knowledgeable, and they can be intentional about who is hired and placed to impact the learning of the kids in Robeson County?
Well, I think that was the reason of putting me back on the committee, to ensure that that piece has taken place, to make sure that someone understands the OIE funds. And because I think everybody here, especially our state people, can witness to this, you can take local funds and say, I want to buy Connie a dress, and you can buy Connie a dress and get away with it. You can take state funds and they're going to say, oh, no. You take federal funds, you're going to wear orange jumpsuit. So we have to be very careful with those federal funds and the things. So I think that was the whole reason of putting me back there, to ensure that the guidelines of the grant were being implemented with fidelity.
So you're going to be on all those interview processes.
Right now, I've been told that, yes.
So if you're not, then
Well, if I'm not,
then okay. All right. So I hope you guys are asking these same questions in your districts, because if our Title VI coordinators and directors do not have a seat at the table, then we don't have a voice at the table, and then we're not advocating for these American Indian students, and then we still continue to produce reports that show that American Indian students are lagging behind. Dr. Connie, I'm sorry. I know your
You're fine.
time is up, but thank you so much. We appreciate your service and dedication to NIEA. We appreciate you. Thank you for your advocacy, not only in Robeson County, but throughout North Carolina and the United States. We appreciate you.
thank you. And one last thing I would like to share once again is that as a member of this board, when you go back to your districts, advocate to not only your districts, but to your tribal communities. Our tribal communities have a major voice, and sometimes they're not using it, and I don't think it's because they don't want to. They don't quite understand tribal consultation and what it entails. And if you're in one of those communities and you don't quite understand tribal consultation, please reach out to me, because their voice is powerful. And honestly, who knows more about the needs of our American Indian students than our tribal communities? Hawa, thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Have a great day. At this time, we welcome Dr. Robert Taylor, who is the Deputy Superintendent of School and Student Achievement. He joins us to share an introduction and information from his department. Thank you for joining SACE, Dr. Taylor.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing, Dr. Locklear? Very glad to be with you all this morning. Just a lot of interesting conversation. I'm glad to hear this. I think I've been quite familiar with the Native American community. I actually had the opportunity to be the Indian Ed coordinator in Clinton City Schools for 8 years. And so I certainly understand the things we want to do to focus on academics for students. That's really what this program is about, and so very glad to hear that. I know that Dr. Silver and I had a conversation, I think, a while back, and one of the things I was interested in is why we cannot have a greater presence at the department as it relates to Indian education. And so I hope that's something that we can work towards, because there's so many things that we're responsible for as school districts, but we may not have that representation at the State Department, and I think that's vitally important. And so hopefully we'll have an opportunity to work towards that. So what I want to do is just give a handful of updates, and then obviously answer any questions that you may have, and address any concerns that you may have, either from something that I talk about or something that affects the department. I do know that one of the things I think that I would suggest to this group is that you try and have a presence with school superintendents. And I know that's through the Superintendents Association. Jack Hoke, he's the executive director. And so when I hear you guys talk about all the things that affect Native American students, many times it's, in my opinion, an awareness. And so as a school superintendent, your goal is to try and impact the academic achievement of every student in your district, regardless of how large or small that demographic may be. And so if they're not aware that a program like this exists, they certainly are going to have Native American students in their district. And so anything they can do to leverage it, I think that's something that they would be open to hearing. And so I would certainly encourage that you all take an opportunity to talk with the Superintendents Association and be able to get information out like that out. So with student and school advancement, essentially what we do is the kind of work that supports every other facet of school functioning. And so those things that are in student and school advancement include school nutrition. They include federal programs. They include North Carolina Virtual Public Schools. They include the Center for Safer Schools. Includes district and regional support, which Dr. Silver is a part of. And so we see our job and our effort is trying to do things that are going to support student learning and put them in a better position to be able to access the academic programs. And so I'll just share a couple of updates, some things that we're doing, and then I'll certainly pause and allow you guys to ask me any questions or share any thoughts that you may have with me. One of the things that I'm responsible for is the Center for Safer Schools and School Safety. And what I can tell you is that I've made a recommitment in terms of how I deal with school safety, and I try and let that be at the forefront of every conversation that I have. When we think about the things that happened in Uvalde most recently and the string of events that happen seemingly every year, then that's something that we need to be on the forefront about. And so part of our effort has been to secure close to $40 million from the General Assembly to address school safety. And so a lot of that money is being used to hire school safety resource officers. A lot of that money is going to be used to continue training for school personnel in school safety. We want to make sure that every school district conducts what we call a comprehensive safety plan, meaning that we bring in outside professionals that are more familiar with school safety, and they're going to look at things that we may not necessarily pay attention to. And so as a superintendent, I had to tell the Sheriff's Department that I'm a school teacher, and that's what I do. And that's where my focus is. And you're a law enforcement officer, and that's what your focus is. We've got to be able to bridge that gap and figure out how we both can attune and address the things that are primary to us, but then think about the other person as well. We're going to have a training center in Montgomery County. It's the old East Montgomery High School that's going to be turned into a training center used by both state professionals such as the SBI, as well as the ability to train school personnel in safety issues. It's going to be the first kind of center that we've had like that in the country. So we're excited about that. And so anything that we do that can keep students safe, we want to continue that work. Federal programs is also one of the areas that I supervise, and I can't say enough to you about the federal funds that we receive as a state. One of the more successful things that we've had has been our Directors Institute, where we actually bring them together every year and talk about the proper use of federal funds. As you know, parent and family engagement is a huge part of that. Again, I think this is an opportunity where we can connect with this community and make sure that those federal programs directors know and understand how we engage all students, particularly Native American students. That's certainly something I think is very important. One of the things that we're also doing is spending about $175,000 and working with the UNC Chapel Hill social work department to help develop what we call social emotional profiles. So we know that all of our students were impacted by the pandemic, and so we want to make sure that those districts can develop profiles where they can actually look at student populations and know where they need to concentrate those efforts. And we know that the Native American community was highly impacted by the pandemic, and so I think it's vitally important that we address those needs as well. In the school nutrition area, one of our biggest goals is to try and make sure that as a state we can provide no-cost breakfast and lunch for all students, kindergarten through 5th grade. That is a lofty goal. We believe that we can do that. One of the things that I think exposed us was the pandemic, and luckily the federal government allowed us to use what we call the summer feeding program to be able to feed students at no cost. And so we recognize that had it not been for a program like that, and it had not been for the effort of many school districts, students would have went hungry. I mean, we had buses that went out into the community. We had National Guards, people that came out and helped out in the various districts. And so we were exposed. We were exposed as a state, but we recognize that nutrition is something that's vitally important. And so that's a big part of what we do in student and school advancement. So we want you to, or at least wanted to share that with you. District and regional support. This is where we go out and support what are the low-performing districts. And I'm sure you guys were familiar with the most recent release of performance data. And so we've gone from 9 low-performing districts and about 440 plus low-performing schools to now 864 low-performing schools and 29 low-performing districts. And so we obviously don't have the capacity to support all of those schools, but it's about how we look at those most needy districts and most needy schools and support them. And so one of the things I certainly would be interested in is the report that you have. And I think that's something that we probably can share with those low-performing districts and schools to say that here's some really good information on Native American students or Indian students. Let's take this opportunity to have this additional data point so we can understand where our students are. And so, again, that work in district and regional support, and I got to tell you that, and she likes this, the comprehensive needs assessment, which is led by Dr. Silver, that is one of the most, if not the strongest part of that district and regional support. They go into a district and they peel back the onion and they reveal those things that districts are not doing that are going to benefit students. And it is one of the most comprehensive processes I've been a part of. And I think that's vitally important. Schools and school districts need to know and understand what is it that we're not doing right. What is it that prevents us from allowing all students to access the curriculum? And so when we begin to look at districts that are in a low-performing status, we know what students are impacted the most. They're our children. And so, and that's why it's important that we begin to develop those tools and make districts understand this is how you address the needs of all students. We know that we can mask performance of low-performing students in those larger numbers, and you don't necessarily see it. But a report like you have, that absolutely helps us understand those students that we do need to address and those students that do need our support. And so with that, I'll stop for a minute and see if there are any questions that you want to ask me, any concerns that you might have. Again, whether it deals with my particular area or anything within the Department of Public Instruction. And I know you're not a quiet group, so
Does your team ensure every school has a resource officer?
Those schools have the opportunity to apply for grants, and it's going to be a needs-based grant. So obviously those districts that are in greater need, they will have an opportunity to access those funds. And that number has grown each year from the General Assembly. And so the more we can do to get them to understand why that's important, then those numbers are going to grow. What I've found is that when you begin to talk about school safety, that's not a partisan issue. It doesn't matter who's the Republicans or Democrats. Everybody wants to keep students safe. And so what we see is that students that are in poor districts where they can't afford to have resource officers, it's a huge need. And so our superintendent in Bladen County Schools and East Arcadia School was one of the farthest schools. And so if there was an incident, it would take 30 minutes for law enforcement to get to that building. And so grants like this allow those schools the opportunity to hire additional resource officers and then expand what it is that we do to make students safe. So very good question.
What about, is there like, I know you mentioned the education programs too, like where you, like, I guess, instruct teachers, principals what to do if there is an incident?
Yes. And so again, that's every school is required to have a response plan. And so whatever that safety plan is something that the local board approves. They do it in closed session because we don't want that to be public information. But what we found is that training is what school staff need as it relates to school safety. I never went to school to be a safety officer. I went to school to be a school teacher. But that's something that you end up taking on. And what I've recognized in nearly 30 years is that school staff have to have specific training about how they do those things, how they look at activities and behaviors that impact the school. And so what we now know is that the biggest part of school safety deals with human behavior. We believe that it's equipment or needing more safety officers, but when we think about Uvalde, that person was able to get into the school because someone propped the door open. If you ever want to look at school safety, go to a school and simply walk around the building and see what you see. You'll probably see sticks and bricks and things like that that prop the door open, which make the place unsafe. A person could walk in the building and not be asked for ID, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think that actually brings up a good point. You shouldn't be able to walk around the school.
Mm-hmm. Well, there you go. I mean,
you shouldn't get asked a question if you're walking around the school. Actually, you bring up another good one. Like, do you guys also talk about, I guess, those kinds of, like, who's allowed to be on the school grounds, at what times of the day, that kind of stuff?
And so each school is responsible for making those kinds of decisions from a policy perspective. And so what we try to do is to train school staff on the things they need to look for. And so, for example, anytime that someone comes and checks out a student, then we should be IDing that person, whether we know that person or not. And so if Dr. Locklear and I go to the school together, and they see, oh, Dr. Taylor, how you doing? We're going to call your son Miles up, and we get him up in a minute, and blah, blah, blah. And then Dr. Locklear comes up, and they says, so, ma'am, may I help you? Yes, I'm here to check out my child, and what's the name? Tiffany. Can I see your ID? Now, what are you thinking? Well, they didn't ID him. Why are they checking my ID? And so it can't be about familiarity. It has to be about a standard practice that you do all the time. So whether that's checking out children, whether that's determining how you egress into a building, how you have access, what we have to do is one, get schools to understand how to have a standard protocol, and then be in communication with parents about why we have that protocol in place. And so I'll give you an example. And regardless of where you may have stood on the mask issue in the summer of 2020, people were upset and saying we should be allowed to wear masks. They should be required. You can't take away my rights. I don't have to wear a mask, blah, blah, blah. People were all over the place. If you went to an airport, what happened? No mask, no entry, and nobody ever questioned it. And so it was a protocol that they had in place. And so that's what we want to be able to do with comprehensive school safety training, is help them to understand how you establish clear protocols and how you get people to accept it so they don't question that. Because if a person wants to do damage at a school, they're going to do it. Our goal and our quest is to try and reduce that as much as possible. And so if I think about trying to get entry to Fort Bragg, that's a secured base. Now, the most damage I'm going to do is shoot some security guards at the front gate, but that's as far as I'm going to get. And so it's about how we reduce damage and mitigate it. But great questions, though.
So you preference the importance of presence here at DPI. You discussed how COVID has exposed us as American Indians even more. And again, we're so proud of this safety report, and all of us working together to get this done. And we focused on one recommendation this year, and that was to secure and establish a department level position here. And again, you stated that there are some federal program directors here. There's not one as it relates to the American Indian director. Can you give us an update on this recommendation?
So now I cannot give you an update on that recommendation, but what I can certainly, as I said, the conversation that I had with Susan is that I certainly see that as a need. I think that recommendation has come several times in the past. Would that be correct? Has that recommendation been made before?
It has, and historically, there has been a position here, and it's not here now, and so we focused our recommendation and having just one because it was of most importance, and this position could do all the other things.
Right.
So it was top priority for us. And so, I mean, as a board, I mean, we would like, before we start planning our next safety report, we would like an update on where this stands.
Okay, so I can get you an update on that recommendation. I'll certainly have a conversation with our state superintendent about it and see where she has been on that particular recommendation, and I'll be glad to bring that back to the advisory council. Absolutely.
Hi, my name's Camille Lanning. I'm the parent representative for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. My day job is actually recreation manager for our tribe.
Okay.
And you mentioned the school nutritions, and I just want to shout out to that program because during the pandemic and even during our summer camps in a regular world, they provide meals for about 250 of our enrolled members. And when the pandemic hit, we had families that would come and wait at the gym for Swain County to deliver the food. Like, it was every single day like clockwork. So we really appreciate that effort, and we really do. So just thank you.
Absolutely. And I will relay that to Dr. Harvey, who is our executive director here. And again, it's one of the, in my opinion, one of our shining stars, one of the greatest level of support that we provided when we were in a dire situation as a nation. And so thank you for that. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Angelique Young, and I have a question. You mentioned that there would be something going on through UNC Chapel Hill with SEO profiling. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Okay. So one of the things that we recognize is that districts need to know more about the social-emotional issues with students. And so we're working with UNC Chapel Hill to help those districts build what they call a social-emotional profile. So they're able to look at those different kinds of things that impact students within that district. And then once they have that district profile, we want to make sure they have the resources to drill that down to individual schools to develop school profiles. So that simply is a data point that lets you know all kinds of demographic things with students, attendance data, performance data, any other kind of mental health type data, where they can be able to identify what portions of our population will need this kind of help as it relates to social emotional issues. What I can tell you is that school districts, there has not been a huge focus on that, and that's something that's more of the watchword within the past 3 to 4 years, social emotional learning. And so it's all about using that professional staff at Chapel Hill to help us build those profiles so that school districts and schools can use those to identify and target the right students. And actually target resources is what it's all about.
Okay, so is this going to be part of a development to create a database platform for all districts to use? Currently, districts are using like a universal screener through MTSS. Some are purchased, some are free, and so it compares apples and oranges when you're looking at the data that you're trying to compare. So is this going to be something that districts can use through their MTSS programs too? And it's pretty much the same thing through.
Yeah. And it's really just another data point. So when they begin to do those kinds of screenings, this gives them additional data as it relates to social emotional learning and social emotional issues. So whatever kind of screening you use, it may or may not focus on that. And so any kind of screening that you do, you want to have as many data points as possible. And so that is what this is really all about, helping them to develop that data point. And that they can use it to assist those students that need help. And so remember, this is what we're doing is helping to develop a district profile. When we first began to look at it, we talked about the school profile, but we have nearly 3,000 schools in North Carolina. And so that's a difficult thing to do. But if we focus on it from a district perspective, now we're talking about 115 school districts, and then they have the opportunity to drill down with the data from there.
Thank you indeed for your dedication to safety in our schools and your dedication throughout the state of North Carolina. Thank you for joining Stacey. We appreciate you today for giving us of your time.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for the work that you do for the benefit of all our students. And anything that you need from me, certainly let me know. Thank you.
Next, we have with us Ms. Julie Pittman, Special Advisor to the Superintendent's Teacher Engagement, to discuss with us North Carolina Teacher Licensure, North Carolina Pathways to Excellence for Teaching Professionals. Welcome, Ms. Pittman.
Hello, thank you all for having me. Give me just a second. Can you all see my screen?
We can.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here with you today. Again, I am the Special Advisor to State Superintendent Truitt for teacher engagement, and was asked to come and give an update on the Pathways to Excellence for Teaching Professionals. While I do not serve on the PEPC Commission and was not a part of the subcommittees, I have been engaged in gathering stakeholder feedback, specifically those around that are teachers or people who are helping serve our students around this work. And I'm working very closely with our current chair and our former chair of PEPC, current chair, Dr. Van Dempsey from UNCW School of Education, the Watson School of Education, and our previous chair, Dr. Patrick Miller, who is the former superintendent for Greene County Schools. So I want to give just a little bit of information about the background for this. So the goal of teacher licensure reform is to ensure that every student in North Carolina has access to a highly effective teacher who can help them meet their greatest potential and successfully prepare them for life after graduation. Licensure reform supports this goal by elevating the teaching profession and by providing educators with additional systems of support and advancement opportunities that ultimately benefit students. The objective is to increase access to effective educators for all North Carolina students by increasing the quality, quantity, and diversity of teacher candidates, allowing them to demonstrate effectiveness through a variety of options and adequately supporting them through their career progressions, including teacher leadership opportunities. So the opportunities for, yes, ma'am?
You can continue.
Oh, sorry. I thought someone had a question. So there are opportunities for solutions for that this licensure reform is really focused on, and that is equitable, statewide, excellent teaching and learning, leading to student achievement for each and every one of our students, to recruit and retain highly effective teachers, to have equitable statewide support of teachers that's designed to improve professional practice, to diversify the workforce, to eliminate obstacles and barriers to becoming a teacher, that it requires systematic change and provides leadership and growth opportunities for classroom teachers, and professional compensation. That we must elevate the teaching profession, and all of this helps give teachers better supports, advancement and growth opportunities, tailored measures of effectiveness, that students will have choice, or teachers will have choice in determining a competitive salary, and ultimately greater respect. All of this is just background so you know how all of this is lining up. All this lines up with our WestEd recommendations, where it says that the state will create a system of teacher development and recruitment that ensures each classroom a high-quality teacher who is supported with early and ongoing professional learning and provided competitive pay. It aligns with the Hunt-Lee recommendations that expand the Advanced Teaching Roles pilot to enable outstanding educators to extend their reach to more students without having to leave the classroom, to recognize teacher leaders with higher compensation, and to improve professional learning and support for developing teachers. The collective responsibility that we have to support teachers as they advance, it requires providing career pathways, develop teachers so that they are prepared to assume new and more challenging roles over time, to design new roles with development opportunities, to build a workforce that is both excellent and diverse, to ensure all teachers are encouraged and have opportunities to pursue advanced roles, to set targets for different teachers pursuing those advanced roles, and to be intentional in our outreach efforts. So a little bit of background on the origins of the Professional Pathways Project. So it started off with the Southern Region Educational Board, as you may have heard, the SREB roundtable convenings. SREB had convenings in 4 different states, North Carolina being one of them, where they brought an idea to elevate the teaching profession and to provide better compensation for teachers. These roundtables included people from all around the state, from a multitude of different areas. That included DPI, the state board, teachers, principals, superintendents, and other stakeholders. Those folks worked with some people at SREB to really work through and this was just a working group, so it was like a think tank. So they were working through some ideas, and North Carolina's roundtable had ideas that came out that were different than the other states were, because that we're really dealing, as one of the previous presenters said, with looking at needs in states and desires in states are best suited to be worked out within those states. So from there, the roundtables came up, or the roundtable in North Carolina came up with some recommendations. And it was known as the North Carolina Education Human Capital Roundtable Recommendations. And they presented to the state board in January of 2021. So they spent some time prior to that really meeting often. They had lots of stakeholder input. I was a classroom teacher while that was happening, and I was included in a couple of those feedback sessions while they were gathering stakeholder feedback. So they had feedback sessions for all different kinds of different stakeholders. And then all of that work was brought to the state board in January of 2021. The state board then charged Pepsi, which is mandated by the General Assembly, the creation of Pepsi, to draft a model. And this became known as the North Carolina Pathways for Excellence for Teaching Professionals. And it was that we saw a first draft of that idea in March of 2021. And that draft began to work in Pepsi subcommittees from March of 2021 until August of 2022. It was supposed to conclude in December of 2021 and come back before the state board, or come back to Pepsi in January of 2022. But the committees saw that there needed to be much more work and input into developing that. And so they took an additional 8 months to work through that. And then Pepsi took a first look at it just last week, and as it came out of subcommittee, and they are working through the subcommittee's recommendations this month and next month. So the Pepsi subcommittee work structure consisted of 4 subcommittees that met monthly: the licensure subcommittee, the budget and compensation subcommittee, the advancement and development subcommittee, and the preparation and entry subcommittee. All of these were supported logistically by North Carolina DPS staff. The subcommittee members were made up of pre through 12th grade schools and districts, including teachers, principals, and district leadership. That district leadership took many different forms, from superintendents, assistant superintendents, HR staff, finance staff, so a lot of different types of leadership there. It also included representation from public and independent colleges and universities and community colleges, from government agencies like the Governor's Office, UNCSO, CCSO, NCICU, North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, the Human Capital Roundtable, and the State Board of Education. And also educational organizations and stakeholders that included, but is not limited to, NCAE, Best in C, Teach for America, the Governor's Drive Task Force, PTA, and RTI. Lots of acronyms there. Each subcommittee was tasked with a certain number of responsibilities. And they were to, I have them here for you to look at, but mostly it was things like determining minimums and verification processes, determining supports and accountability models, looking at how all of the different things that we have from the past that worked made it into our future that might work better, and things that weren't working in our past were made better or re-envisioned with new innovation going forward. So this is the very first, you can see at the bottom, the deadline was December 2021, but they did not release their work until the end of August. In fact, it did not go public until, as I said, last week, which is the first full week of September. So we got positive feedback from stakeholders that included things like that this would increase opportunity for leadership and growth without having to leave the classroom and go into administration, that there is potential for much higher compensation, that there is additional and systematic teacher support, especially in the early career, that there are multiple pathways for people to enter the profession with increased support along the way, and that includes looking at the fact that, and I heard this earlier, that one test should not determine whether someone should be able to remain in the classroom because they could or could not pass that test, which does not have a great amount of insight into how effective the teacher is going to be in the classroom. And then professional development funds, an agency for teachers to choose how they advance their pedagogy and practice. So what's next? In September and October, Pepsi will have their considerations and begin to work and then vote on that. The goal is to have it to go before the State Board of Education, hopefully in November or December, depending on when it comes out of Pepsi, and then hopefully would go before the General Assembly during the long session. I imagine that the General Assembly will take a look at all of the different facets of the proposal and look at which ones can be piloted and or implemented early, and which ones need to be piloted and implemented over smaller scale or longer time. So we're taking ongoing stakeholder feedback. So anyone can send their feedback to the email that's on your screen. We're also in October 27th through the 29th, our state is holding our DPI is holding the AIM conference, and AIM stands for Accelerate, Invigorate, and Motivate Educators. And that AIM conference will have lots of time for people who are in attendance, which will include folks from all of our school systems and charter schools across the state to hear and give feedback and give ideas for how to make this the best plan going forward. We're taking ongoing teacher, principal, and superintendent feedback. In fact, EdNC just published an article earlier this week, and there's the opportunity for teachers and others to give feedback. So if you subscribe to EdNC, you should be able to see that come out, and it will be in their top 10 that comes out today. And then we'll take external stakeholder feedback all along the way. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have at this time. I know that was a brief overview, and I'm sure that you have lots of questions, and I'm happy to answer any of them.
Ms. Pittman, this is Rodney Jackson from Cumberland County Schools.
Hi.
Question for you. You mentioned several times about teacher retention and recruiting teachers.
Yeah.
My question is, how can we do that? How can we recruit teachers, and when we have taken away their state benefits, mainly their health insurance?
So that, I think, is outside the purview of what the Pepsi Commission is doing in terms of the benefits, and that is outside of the scope of what I could probably answer in terms of what the future of that is. But I can say that when you look at the pathways model and you're able to see that teachers or potential teachers could come in to teaching and look at making money early in their career and look at making well more money over the course of their career through multiple different pathways, then it becomes a greater, a more enticing opportunity for a profession. So, for instance, I am a second career. I came to teaching as a second career. I had been in the workforce for 10 years, and I came in at what used to be known as lateral entry. And I, during the course of the 3 years of my beginning teacher years, had several obstacles that I had to overcome in order to become a certified classroom teacher with my CPL, my continuing professional license, and mostly it was because I think at that time there's so many different, and still today, that the licensure, the way that people come into license to become a licensed teacher has been patchworked through legislation and policy many, many times. And so it's a very complex, convoluted system. This system will streamline that, but also if I were coming in now, there are opportunities for me to do that lateral entry through some residency models, but oftentimes teachers would have to take additional classes, as they would have to continue to do in the new model, but you would be paid along the way in the new model. And so I think increasing pay early, like coming in as an apprentice teacher or a licensed one teacher, to be able to have the opportunity to make $30,000 or $35,000 a year as an apprentice teacher or as a licensed one teacher, and be able to be compensated for that work early, and then have the opportunity to make in upwards of $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 by the time that I am in my license 4 in just a few years is much more enticing. And I think the benefits package is very important, and I certainly am very appreciative for mine. But I do understand that there is a lot of concern for that in the field. Again, we're trying to look at it from an asset-based approach where that we're increasing more compensation and making the pathways to becoming a teacher more sustainable and easier to manage, not easier, but easier to manage because of the levels of support that will be given both by advanced teachers, administration, and hopefully by our institutes of higher education.
Thank
Are
you.
there other? Mm-hmm.
Thank you for joining us, Ms. Pittman. Thank you for your dedication to ensuring that we have teachers. I help train teachers at UNCP, so I know that recruitment and retention is so very important. And our teachers are our first role models for our students. So thank you for your dedication to the field of teacher education.
Of course, and I love, I know that you have representation from all across the state, and there are so many incredible things that are happening across the state to help recruit our teachers and sustain them. And I'm really excited about several things that I've seen in my tenure here at the department, which is really not even 2 years, but a lot of work that I've seen that's happening specifically, well, all across the state, but specifically in the Sand Hills and Southeast region, as you're looking at how to grow your TA to teacher programs and your 2+2 programs and the articulation agreements that are happening between your community colleges and your schools of ed. I know UNC Pembroke and Fayetteville State University have some really incredible partnerships in that area. UNCW does as well, Elizabeth City State. There's several things that are happening right now up at Western Carolina and Appalachian State University. And so I just know that there are so many great things that are happening, not just with those universities, but with the community colleges that feed them and our school systems that are looking at how we can really make the path to becoming a teacher so much more rewarding and make the profession of teaching so much more valued.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we have with us Mr. Curry Bird, Director, and Mr. Quinn Godwin, Associate Director of the newly created American Indian Heritage Commission. Stacey wants to congratulate the both of you on your new roles. We look forward to learning about this new initiative today.
Thank you, Dr. Locklear. I'm glad to be here, and I'm very proud that I have a number of students who were under my direction when I was coordinator of the North Carolina American Indian Youth Organization. Consuela, Susan, Ria, Angelique, I think Brandy probably attended one of the conferences when I was director of the North Carolina Native American Youth Organization. And so I'm very pleased to see some of my former students as adults and contributing to the success of American Indian students here in North Carolina, because education is so important to our communities, and I'm just very proud of their successes. So I'm very happy to be here. I am the director of the North Carolina American Indian Heritage Commission. Quinn Godwin is my associate director. We are a 2-staff organization currently. Hopefully we will grow that into more folks because American Indian heritage is so important to North Carolina. And we're very excited to be here. The next slide talks about when we were created, and we were created by the legislature through General Statute 143B-135.5, which established us in the 2021 General Assembly session, and they funded us with the recurring funds. So we are here to stay, and if we don't screw it up. But we have good folks working with me, and we have excellent commissioners who are established. We will be meeting in next month sometime. We're trying to get our calendar coordinated with the governor's office, with the Secretary of Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, where we're housed. Next slide. We were created to preserve, interpret, and promote American Indian culture, history, arts, customs here in North Carolina. And we know we have a wide variety of tribes that exist here in North Carolina. We have a large Indian population, over 130,000 that identify as American Indian alone, according to the U.S. Census in 2020. We know there was an undercount, obviously, because there were a lot of issues and barriers that existed at that particular time. And so we know we have a much larger Indian population. And we look at American Indians as a whole, and regarding American Indian as well as other population groups that may have existed, whether they're Caucasian, African American, Hispanic, other cultures that may have married into our community. We know it's a much larger population here in North Carolina. So one of our tasks, as far as our goals, is to assist in coordination of American Indian cultural events. We don't necessarily plan those ourselves, but we would like to promote those as much as possible through public awareness of our American Indian Heritage Month in North Carolina. We know we're more than just the month of November, as Dr. Locklear has said earlier, but we are promoting American Indian culture throughout the state throughout the year. Our next goal is to encourage American Indian cultural tourism. We know the Eastern Band of Cherokee do an excellent job in their promotion of their resources in their community through their arts and culture, their activities that they have going on there, certainly their gaming operation and other cultural activities that are going on there. And we like to see our other tribal communities take advantage of using that as a model for things that they can do within their communities. I know the Kahari tribe has a very successful river initiative going on, and we feel that's something that they could build upon and make that more successful in their community as far as an economic driver. And we know other tribal communities have similar types of things they can draw upon in their own individual communities. Also to advise and assist Secretary Wilson on oversight and management of all state-managed American Indian historical sites. We're actually going to Trail of Tears next week to see the mound there and participate in the dedication of the mound, but also understand more about the Trail of Tears and bringing more recognition and assistance in that activity. It's also to advise and assist Secretary Wilson on American Indian matters, things that happen here in the state. I know you're actually advocating for Director of Indian Education Program, so that's something we could encourage our department also to be on board in promoting that. I know you have a direct link to the Superintendent of Public Instruction, but it also helps to have other departmental secretaries like Secretary Wilson, Secretary Casual over at Department of Administration, any of those voices that can help build support for that initiative and that important director here in the Department of Public Instruction. Also, we have, next slide, our various commissioners. And these are individuals who come from the various tribal communities and urban organizations. So Greg Jacobs, who's coming from the Kahari community, he's someone who works in tribal administration, so he brings that expertise to the commission as far as a practitioner and administrator position. We have Lynn Harlan coming to represent the Eastern Band of Cherokee. She comes from a background of promotion of American Indian activities and enterprises that go on within a tribal community. Dr. Marty Richardson, who's coming from the Halawasaponi tribe, he comes with a research background and involvement in Indian affairs. The same with soon to be Dr. Nancy Strickland Fields at the Museum of the American Indian down at UNC Pembroke. She comes with a lot of tribal history and knowledge, as well as the arts and culture and preservation of artifacts and other activities within the tribal communities. Next slide is the Meherrin community. We have Chief Jonathan Caldwell, who's coming from a chief perspective, someone again who's involved in community affairs. Forrest Hazel with the Okinichi Band of the Saponi Nation comes again with a background of research and knowledge from his background. Kara Stewart, who's a former member of the State Advisory Council on Indian Education, comes with knowledge of school curriculum, textbooks, and any types of educational experiences that she has to build upon. And J.D. Moore, who comes from the Waccamaw Siouan community, comes from a standpoint of being someone who is a practitioner of the cultural activities. He also works in the corporate affairs, so someone who has that particular background and expertise. Next slide is our representatives from urban Indian communities. Tiffany Renee Pearson, who comes from a background of social work and mental health activities. Jennifer Revels Baxter, who is a longtime advocate for American Indian activities in Greensboro. Rebecca LeClaire, an advocate for American Indian activities in the Metrolina community. And Sandon Jacobs, who's a practitioner who lives here in the Raleigh area. Again, comes from that practitioner activity and experience, but also works in corporate affairs. So again, we have a wide variety of individuals who will serve on our commission, who will help guide us in our activities. One of our goals is to promote American Indian culture. So we'll be looking for ways that we can do that through various activities that we may promote, things that the commissioners may bring that they feel are priorities for our commission to handle. We'll also be looking at the community voices. We'll go out to the various tribal communities and urban communities and find out what they see as the commission doing itself as far as promoting American Indian arts and history and culture. We'll be working to preserve American Indian traditional arts, celebrating American Indian arts and through acting, dancing, singing, music, any types of ways that we can promote American Indian arts in its various art forms. Our next topic would be research. So conducting American Indian research by collecting oral histories. We know a lot of our community members have experienced a lot of, well, not necessarily untimely deaths, but just the passing of individuals who are the keepers of our history. So making sure that we collect those histories and document them and keep them alive for future generations. Conduct research on history of American Indians in North Carolina, and conduct research on American Indian contemporary experiences. We know it's important to know where we've been. Also, we need to know what we're experiencing now or have experienced since the 60s and 70s and 80s. But also, as we plan for the future, we'll need to know that information in the past to be able to plan for the future. Next slide is education, assist in the development of American Indian curriculum. We know that's one of the goals of SACE and its job within the Department of Public Instruction. But we want to assist in doing that. And we know there are a lot of resources within the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources that we would like to tie together with Department of Public Instruction to make you very aware of what we already have in-house through our state archives, our state libraries, our state historical markers program. Also increase awareness of resources for use in the classroom. Again, not necessarily trying to duplicate any of your efforts from the State Advisory Council on Indian education, but help to promote what we currently have and what you have, and making sure that we're making the public more aware of what resources actually exist. And to promote the teaching of North Carolina American Indian history in the classroom. Again, not necessarily trying to duplicate what has already been done through SACE, but trying to build upon and be more of an advocate for the work that you're doing. And then also historical sites, acknowledging places of historical significance within our various tribal communities. We have a slide up there that shows East Carolina Indian School, making our public more aware of sites like East Carolina Indian School, getting a marker for the school, designating it as a historical site, and identifying and recording other schools that American Indians attended here in North Carolina. Next slide. And highlighting the historical fact that American Indians were not allowed to go to white schools, that we had to basically fund our schools for our American Indian students to attend, and get markers for those schools that will come either through public or private funding and partnerships there, and getting our places on the Federal Registry for historical preservation, and looking to those designated as historical sites and getting those marked with GSI numbers. And so that will help in regards to individuals like pipelines and other things that may come through our various tribal communities, so that we can either prevent them from coming through our historical sites, or mitigating some of the impact they may have on our historical sites. You know, we may not be able to prevent something from coming through, but we can at least try and lessen the harm they may be doing to those particular sites. We have had a lot of success with up in Cherokee with some of the mounds they've been able to protect and preserve, and we'd like to see that done for some of our tribal schools when the sites where they have. And then our next steps. So one of the things we have to do is create a logo for our Heritage Commission and create a website. We know some things take some time, a little more time than we were expecting, but we're working on it. And we're going to have our first meeting next month. We hope to have a good turnout from our commissioners, as well as having the Secretary Wilson there, as well as the governor. And then meet with tribal councils and urban Indian organizations and tribal communities and urban communities to find out what they would see as some of our priorities, what they would like to see us do. And then, next slide. Establish relationships within the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. Quinn's been doing an excellent job as far as collecting information on the various resources that we have within our department, and making sure that we're aware, they're aware of us. One of the things we've heard is it's about time. And we're like, well, you know, we're glad to be here. We wish it could have been sooner, but we're very happy that we're being welcomed in. building partnerships with institutions and organizations like SACE and Department of Public Instruction, but also with like universities like UNC Pembroke, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, NC State, Duke, Western Carolina, UNCW, East Carolina. Don't mean to leave anybody's alma mater out, but we're going to try and be very inclusive of everybody as much as possible. And then attend cultural events and educational conferences where we can, where we have the bandwidth to do that, and obviously the financial resources to do that. We have the department's well wishes to do as much as we can, and so we're going to try and get out there and do that as we can. I'm going to Guilford Natives Powwow this weekend. Quinn was just at the Kahari Powwow this past weekend. So we want to make sure we have a presence at these various activities and cultural events. We'd invite you to the Dix Park Powwow October the 8th here in Raleigh. We will be there and participating in that as well. And so we're very open to anything that you would like to see us do. I know we're focusing on doing some things with curriculum and teaching of American Indian history within our public schools. So any recommendations you have or anything that you're promoting, especially the director of Indian education here in North Carolina. I know the past director, Betty Mangum, very well, and I know she was here and was just a really great resource for American Indian students in school here, and so I know the value of that. I've been a part of National Indian Education Association. I congratulate Rodney on his upcoming award, and Dr. Locklear and Dr. Dees, when they were with the NIA board, I'd certainly encourage you to be a member of that organization, pursue a position on the board. I think it's very critical that we continue to have a voice there. And I know that a number of you have those various experiences from your personal backgrounds and from your professional careers and from your jobs. And I'm glad to see everybody here. I know Amanda's been here as a representative from Metrolina. She's now in the Triangle area. And so we're glad to have her here. And I think she'll be a really good resource for us as well as for SACE and others within our community. So I'd just like to say thanks. I don't know if Quinn would have anything to add?
The only thing I wanted to add is about the Governor's Page Week for American Indians. That's going to be a great program. I'm actually coming out of the governor's office. I've only been full-time with Curry for the past 2 or 3 weeks. I was covering for my former director when she was on maternity leave, but this is actually something that the governor's Page program put into play last year, and it's just coming to fruition now. They saw a lot of success with the Hispanic. They did a Hispanic Student Week last year, and they wanted to include American Indians. So, of course, American Indian students are allowed to apply, for every week that they have. And I've actually spoken to some in the past when they asked me to come over and speak to the students. So, anything you can do to encourage our young people, juniors and seniors, to sign up for the Governor's Page program, it's going to be great. We're going to coordinate some things at the Executive Mansion. Secretary Cashwell is going to be over there. She's going to speak, and possibly the governor. So they're going to see all these different departments we have and be in spaces like the Executive Mansion. So the more students you can get applied, the better.
And I'd also like to add that we do have a state internship program. So I'd encourage anybody who has a college-age student or child, if you encourage them to apply for any of those opportunities that exist. And also for anyone who has a rising student who is going to go to university, there is a North Carolina American Indian Scholarship Program that's operated through the Triangle Community Foundation that, to my knowledge, they never get enough applicants, so they always have leftover money that you're almost guaranteed if you're going to college and you're an American Indian student, you got to apply for the job and you have $1,000 in your pocket. Just that easy. And I know I have to give a shout out to the Lumbee tribe because they have a scholarship for American Indian Lumbee students who are going to school. Again, you have to apply for these opportunities. I'm sure the Cherokee have the same going on with their students going to the universities at North Carolina as well as University of Tennessee, I think, where the students get maybe not a full ride, but a greatly reduced cost to the student.
Tuition at UT and University of Georgia.
In Georgia, yeah. And those are, I think, are opportunities that we also need to look at as far as advocating for our American Indian students with our UNC system. I know UNC Pembroke has a really good tuition program for in-state as well as out-of-state students. So just encouraging our students to take advantage of those opportunities that they have. And it's just a shame when they aren't taken advantage of. And it's hard to see students that go into big debt by not going to one of our UNC system schools or schools like University of Texas, Tennessee, or Georgia, where they have opportunities. I think some of these other schools are very good, but I'm an advocate for public education in pre-K and high school as well as university level. So that's it. Any questions?
Curry,
Yes, sir.
Cumberland County has teamed up with the Cumberland County Arts Council, Federal
Yes.
Arts Council this year.
Yes.
I have the flyers there. I'll give it to you before we leave today. But my office and the Art Council are soliciting artifacts, any type of craft that you want to put in their office for the whole month of November.
Great.
But I got the flyers. I'll show it to you later on.
Okay, great.
I think we
Fantastic.
have an upcoming meeting with them too. They
Yeah,
reached out this week.
Yep.
Arts Council.
Yeah. Because they're also, that's a wonderful thing about North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources is we house the state archives, state archaeology, state libraries, North Carolina historical markers, the museums, North Carolina Arts Council, just a wide variety of those institutions are under our department. So we are that person at the table. So we are representing American Indians, and we're not to be confused with Indian Affairs, Commission of Indian Affairs, because they are actually in the Department of Administration, and their focus is on policy and programs. They're more governmental in their mission, and they're part of the Department of Administration, which houses kind of those state infrastructure opportunities. And so we're not here to replace them. We're just here to again, like Stacey, we're here to collaborate and be an additional voice for American Indians. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We look forward to forming a partnership with you guys and looking forward to working with the commission. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Next, we'll hear from Mr. Rodney Jackson. He's going to provide us with some Title VI updates. Absolutely.
I think we got 6 minutes till lunch, so I'll go fast. There aren't any changes this year to the 506 grant, to the Title VI grant, but I just want to give you a little bit of little information about how the grant operates. The formula grant, the Office of Indian Education formula grant, it opens every year in February. This past year opened in February 7th, and then it closed on March the 11th. There's no leeway. You have to submit Part 1 by that closing date, which this past year was March 11th. The Part 1 is your count, your how many American Indians you have in your county and your school system. Part 2, which opened on April the 4th and then closed on May the 13th, that is where you put all your narratives in there, how you're going to spend your money, how much money you're requesting. But that will close on May 13th, and then the grant was usually you get your letter from the Office of Indian Education on the second week in July to let you know whether you have been selected to receive the grant and how much you've been awarded. Next slide. The grant is awarded to local the LEAs to support the local Indian tribes and organization. It's there to help the students understand the culture of American Indians and to help them with their education. Next slide. The annual performance report, which is what everybody's working on right now. You have this here opened up the 29th of August and will close on the 23rd of September. On this one, you have to explain how you used your money, what you used your money for, how you used it, what benefits came from it. So this has to be submitted on the 23rd. If this is not submitted on the 23rd, then you have to meet with the Office of Education out of Washington, D.C. and explain why you're not doing what you said you were doing your grant. Next slide. 506 form is what you have to be in the program of Indian education. This grant is also electronic. Next slide, please. This is electronic form that can be used, and you can sign it electronically also. Next slide. The enrollment for having a Indian education program, minimum of 10 students, which I think Dr. Connie mentioned that earlier. Students must be in your school at least one day out of the school year. That's it, just one day. Homeschool students, they can be in your program if they enroll in one class in your school system, in the public school system. And I just found out this week that we have a homeschool student who called one to be in our program, but they have to be enrolled in their local school for at least maybe take a PE class. But unfortunately, this student didn't do that, so they could not be in our program. Next slide. And are there any questions about the grant? I will say this: Dr. Connie didn't elaborate like she should have. She is the largest in the nation, not just North Carolina, but she is the largest in the nation for the Indian Education Grant. And she's also the largest in the state of North Carolina. We are the second largest in the state of North Carolina, Cumberland County, but we're nowhere near her 13 million. We only get maybe 300,000, so we're the second largest. But if like Amanda, if you're interested in getting this started in your school system, she's wonderful. She helped me get started, and she can help you get yours started also. And so that is it.
I have a quick question for
Yes.
you. As far as the homeschool information goes, for an elementary student, maybe anybody listening to this meeting would like to know, how would that work for an elementary child to be enrolled in one class?
That's a good question, and I don't know how to answer that one. Only go ahead, Connie.
I'm sorry, ask the question again.
The homeschool process, it said that a homeschool student could be enrolled in your Indian education program as long as they enrolled in at least one class at the local school.
As long as that student is enrolled in the school system and is listed as a student within that school system, they can qualify for the Indian education program. Or in our case, like if there's a different school or a different program, we can develop a consortium agreement. But if the child, like a lot of our homebound students, they may be listed as homebound, but they're still enrolled into public schools, they still qualify for services through OIE funds.
So are you asking, how can you get an elementary kid to a school?
Well, if they're homeschooled.
So they're not homebound, they're homeschooled.
So
That's
so for a high school student or a middle school student, I guess it's kind of easy. You can enroll them in that one class. When I spoke to Annabella, she didn't. All her email said was they have to be enrolled in one class. She didn't elaborate whether it's elementary, middle school, or high school. So I can find out about that and get back with you at our next meeting.
Well, I guess the recommendation would be to let anyone listening know that if that's an option, they should reach out to the Office of Indian Ed
Yes.
to get clarification.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, can I say something?
Absolutely.
I know y'all have heard several times throughout the day, congratulations about your award. Let me say something about that real quick. This award came from two people, Angelique and Wendy Bryant from the Coharie tribe are the ones who nominated me, so thank you to them. Last Friday, I had to go to the Honda dealership. One of my cars was having some trouble, and I walked up there, and one of the ladies saw me walking up there, and she said, "Mr. Jackson," and it was one of my former students. And we stood there and talked for a few minutes, took some pictures and so forth, so on. It's a great thing being an educator because you get to shape and mold the minds of your future leaders. In 2018-19, when I was asked to take over the Indian Education Department, I said yes right away because I knew I would get to shape and mold the mind of my people, the American Indian people. And that has been such an excitement for me. This past year, we found 7 American Indian male students who had dropped out of school. And we went after those 7 students. And we put those 7 young boys back in school. And I sit here to tell you today that all 7 of them graduated with a high school diploma this past May. That's what my office is doing. That was my vision. That was my goal when I took over this position, and this is what my staff has bought into to get the dropout rate lowered. Unfortunately, we're not only are we dealing with dropout rates, we're dealing with mental illness and mental health. Cumberland County School had 7 students this past year to try to commit suicide. 4 of them were successful. 2 of them were American Indian students. Those 2 were Lumbee Indians. One of them was a 6th grader that put a 9mm in his mouth and blew his brains out. We need more help with mental illness. We need more school counselors. We need more social workers, and that's what we're going to work on this year, along with the dropout rate for American Indian students. But the award is great, but if it weren't for my office, I wouldn't be receiving this. They are the backbones of my office, and that lady back there, Dr. Connie Locklear, is the best role model that I've ever had in my life. So she is also the reason I'm receiving this award. So thank you, Connie.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. All right, at this time, we are going to break for lunch, and then we're also going to discuss after lunch, we're going to go ahead and discuss the SACY Summit work. So that work session will not be streamed on YouTube. We're going to unpack and plan for that January date. Thank you.
115 is what did you?
Traditionally, and then like when Rob Sept,
She started showing her.
and so a lot of their artwork is
And
now
we brought that up actually last like talked about like supplementing museum salary. Because we were way out there. Something about that too.
Right, and I get paid. What I would say is this is We're not asking you for a lot. These are just the things. Okay. These are just like, just the needs, and have that laid out statewide, and have the actual amount, and then the best thing is what percentage you're asking. And the other thing I would tell you is this, tell them that we had a full-time person. We may be able to increase our numbers, and as a result of increasing our numbers, that could decrease the amount of money that you have to give us. So that's the way I should do it. Lay that out. Ryan will be a great full-time person. He knows this grant, and he serves on safety, and he's very familiar. So, yeah, that's the way I would address it.
All right.
All right.
We actually talked about it, well, like I said, we've been talking about it since before the summer. And, the last meeting, we actually had, oh God, what's his name? The guy that's.
Speed back up and like, it's crazy how many kids they come out of woodwork to do like sports and stuff. It's been
Also bring Raji in, because, you know, they're all, I'm assuming they're all three differently compensated. This one paid out of her, the grant. Stephen's paid, he's part of the Office of Diversity and Equity and Inclusion.
Give them a call.
Okay.
Or give me a call.
I was just telling them, they had, at the museum, they've taken about away a lot of the traditions that have been around ages. They got grants to do some of the traditional work, but then what has happened is that artists have like just so they've taken all of those old pieces out, not got rid of them, but replaced them like inside the display with like contemporary art. So they've been doing it hard. I mean, yeah.
Put my number on here. Put these in my What?
I'll tell you another congratulations then, right? I didn't get to say it officially yet.
Thank you.
I was talking about with the Indian Ed, because I'm part of the Wake County's Indian Ed parents, committee. I attend the meetings and stuff. Like our big thing, you probably heard of like Miss Gwynn's wanting to retire and trying to help because she's a part-time position.
Right.
Like trying to figure out how to, the stuff to do to get that boosted up, but I know it's all about the numbers.
But there's enough.
There's enough kids.
Y'all could have a full-time position over there.
Yeah, if they could get more kids on them, fill out the forms. But part of the form is
but you know
having
what?
the enrollment number, right? They have to have an enrollment number, be an enrolled member to be part of the program. So they don't?
See, that's why they take the those mics are still on, you can't turn them off. But I mean, I just want you to just know, it's fine, I'm not saying.
You can use the first one. And it's not wrong with the first one. You can use that as after enrollment.
He's on the way to turn them off.
I would roll on those for them getting scholarships. That could be in your program, but they.
See, that's what I heard, that they had to have a private enrollment paper to be able to be in, like, that form to be complete and be, so that's good to know, but like, you can work on getting more
And then,
kids, like.
what Connie did, she showed up. We assigned them a Indian education by those 6 months in hours. So when you want to pull up just your American training, you can just get that.
It's just, I need to escape. That's good. I need to jot that down. Because that's some of the work we need to do for sure, is get more kids in the forms and getting that done, like increase the numbers. Thank you for that, that's good information.
She still have a computer, but she's got.
And the funny thing, like, that was my house, and then I sold it. And I'm just like, she's like, are you gonna come stay here? I'll stay at the hotel. I got plenty of cousins now.